Exhausted British soldiers walked out of the barn with their hands raised, dropping their empty rifles onto the mud of the Paradis farm courtyard. Rainwater poured down their helmets and soaked their heavy wool uniforms. It was May 27, 1940. The 99 men of the Royal Norfolk Regiment were mostly hastily mobilized civilian reservists from eastern England, far removed from the professional military elite. They stepped forward to surrender, assuming the battle was over. They expected the status of prisoners of war under international law. Instead, 2 MG-34 heavy machine guns answered them. Company Commander Fritz Knöchlein and the soldiers of the SS Totenkopf Division opened fire, cutting through the steady sound of the torrential downpour. This execution was the direct consequence of a massive strategic collapse further south. Weeks earlier, German armored columns had breached the Ardennes forest, an area French command considered impassable for tanks. The main Allied army retreated toward the coast of Dunkirk, needing time for an organized evacuation. The Norfolk reservists had received a strict order to hold their positions. They formed a rear guard shield to delay the advancing German units and buy hours for the retreating main force. They held the defensive perimeter around the French village until their ammunition boxes were empty. Now, the 99 men lay scattered across the wet farmyard. The machine gun fire stopped. Knöchlein ordered his subordinates forward. SS troops marched toward the brick wall and drove their bayonets into the chests of anyone still moving. Underneath those bayoneted bodies at the farm, a few men were still breathing. While these survivors hid in French villages, the officer who ordered their execution received state promotions. 2 British soldiers crawled out from under the corpses. They slipped into the dark countryside. The Gestapo quickly expanded its dragnet across the newly occupied territory. German military command enforced strict occupation rules. Any French civilian caught harboring Allied soldiers faced execution by a firing squad. Yet local farmers took the risk. They moved the broken men between barns and cellars. Meanwhile, the SS hierarchy ignored the massacre. Fritz Knöchlein experienced rapid career advancement instead of a court-martial. The state rewarded his actions with new ranks. He pinned iron crosses to his dark uniform, while French peasants searched for the wounded survivors in the night. His path to that SS command began 11 years earlier on the streets of Munich. The commander at Paradis grew up in the collapsing capital of Bavaria. Fritz Knöchlein was born in Munich on May 27, 1911. By 1929, the 18-year-old searched for work in a fractured city. The Great Depression wiped out the local economy. Winter streets offered only cold wind and chaos. Crowds of jobless men stood on corners. Banknotes lost their value overnight. Radical recruiters worked these desperate crowds, offering simple answers. Nearly 3 million Germans lacked jobs that year. This devastation created a massive audience for political extremes. Adolf Hitler promised a new order. Knöchlein listened. He took a pen and signed the documents to join the party.
That signature secured his entry into the Schutzstaffel in June 1934, finalizing a crucial shift in his career. 2 years of daily ideological drill awaited the recruit. After the power transition on January 30, 1933, the state actively absorbed reliable youth into its primary paramilitary guard. Heinrich Himmler personally oversaw this candidate selection between 1935 and 1936. Knöchlein received deployment orders for the SS Junker School in Braunschweig. The academy occupied a massive 19th-century ducal palace, repurposed specifically to mold loyal political officers. Inside the facility, the echo of hobnailed boots reverberated constantly through the cold stone corridors. The curriculum consisted of racial theory lectures and rigorous tests designed for unquestioning submission, deliberately excluding classical military tactics. Instructors pushed cadets through exhausting physical regimens to strip away their previous civilian identities.
Braunschweig operated alongside Bad Tölz as an original training center for the new armed divisions. Trainees spent endless hours internalizing political doctrine instead of studying conventional warfare. By graduation, the cadet possessed the psychological readiness to execute any command issued by the leadership. Men who once managed internal terror behind barbed wire now became the vanguard pushing across state borders. Braunschweig graduates first applied their ideological training during the invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939. Fritz Knöchlein secured a major promotion after the campaign. He took command of the 3rd Company within the 2nd Motorized SS Infantry Regiment. This specific unit formed the backbone of the Totenkopf, or Death's Head Division. Political fanaticism replaced standard military doctrine. Theodor Eicke commanded the division. Previously, Eicke managed Dachau, the state's first concentration camp established in 1933. He transferred the camp's strict disciplinary rules and violence directly to the frontline troops. His soldiers fought without relying on traditional army manuals. Months later, this indoctrinated mentality shifted its focus toward the west. German armored tracks crossed the French border on May 10, 1940.
The indoctrinated ruthlessness of Fritz Knöchlein's troops became a fatal catalyst near Le Paradis. 97 men would soon occupy a mass grave beside a farm, while their executioner collected medals. But in mid-May 1940, they were still alive and cut off from the coast. They were the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Norfolk Regiment. The Western Front crumbled rapidly under the advance of German armor. 338,000 troops reached the sea at Dunkirk. One isolated battalion remained trapped inland. That evacuation moved numbers equal to a major city's population. The Norfolks stayed behind. They held a blocking position to cover the withdrawal routes. German forces tightened the encirclement around the village. The battered field radio crackled with a final transmission from headquarters. There would be no reinforcements and no extraction.
German armor and mortar teams pounded the farmhouse, shattering red brick walls directly over the defenders. The order to hold Le Paradis expired on May 27, 1940, when the battalion ran out of ammunition. Fritz Knöchlein's 3rd Company poured continuous heavy fire into the farm complex. The German unit had already lost 150 men fighting through the village streets. Now they directed maximum firepower at the last remaining pocket of resistance. The surviving British troops retreated into a cramped cowshed. They choked on the thick smell of gunpowder and pulverized brick dust hanging in the enclosed air. Inside the ruined structure, Major Lyle Ryder assessed the grim reality. Only 99 men remained alive. Most were wounded, bleeding heavily, and covered in thick mud. Ryder checked the remaining weapons. The standard-issue Lee Enfield rifles held 10 rounds, but now every chamber sat empty. The men had fired their last bullets. Further resistance meant annihilation. Capitulation was the standard military decision for a unit with exhausted resources. The 1929 Geneva Convention guaranteed the preservation of life for combatants who laid down their arms. The major made his final tactical choice to save the wounded. Ryder ordered his men to stand down and prepare for captivity. The process of surrender began. A dirty piece of white cloth was pushed through the splintered timber of the ruined doors. The German guns went silent. The 99 battered soldiers gathered their strength and supported their severely injured comrades. The British soldiers walked out of the shelter. The Geneva Convention ceased to apply the moment 99 unarmed Britons stood against a local barn wall. The surrendered troops expected a standard march to a holding facility. Instead, they faced 2 heavy machine guns. Both weapons were positioned just meters away on the grass. The SS guards ordered the captives to strip off their gear. Helmets, canvas webbing, and pouches were tossed into the dirt. The British soldiers were herded onto a small paddock. Guards forced them to line up tightly along the solid brick facade of the farm building. Company Commander Fritz Knöchlein stood watching the formation. He raised his hand and gave a sharp downward wave. The gunners instantly opened fire. The MG-34 machine gun fired standard Mauser ammunition at a cyclic rate of 800 to 900 rounds per minute. This volume of fire left zero chance for men packed into a dense group. The continuous volley tore through the ranks in seconds. The prisoners collapsed against the brickwork. They fell into the dirt, piling on top of each other. The firing stopped only when no one remained standing on the lawn. Knöchlein then ordered his troops forward. The German soldiers fixed their steel bayonets. They walked directly into the mass of fallen men. Guards drove their blades into chests and throats. They targeted any twitching body to ensure no one survived the volley. The dead were left lying in the field overnight. The bodies remained on the grass until morning. The following day, Knöchlein forced local French civilians from the Pas-de-Calais region to dispose of the evidence. Heavy rain turned the French soil into thick mud. The rhythmic sound of spades slicing into the wet earth echoed across the quiet pasture. The locals dug a large mass grave right next to the execution site under armed guard. They buried 97 corpses.
Among the 97 corpses in the fresh pit, 2 bodies were missing. Lightly wounded in the arm, Private William O'Callaghan dragged his comrade with shattered legs through the darkness. Private Albert Pulley lay unconscious, bleeding from multiple machine gun wounds. O'Callaghan pulled him away from the execution site into an abandoned pigsty nearby. For 3 days and nights, the 2 soldiers survived by chewing raw potatoes and drinking muddy water from shallow puddles on the dirt floor. Surviving the massacre was merely the beginning of their ordeal. Across the Pas-de-Calais region, the German army hunted down any remaining stragglers. Eventually, local French citizens found the 2 exhausted men. Defying strict martial law, the farmers hid the wounded soldiers on their property.
While the farmers risked execution by firing squad to harbor the survivors, whispers of the slaughter spread beyond the fields. How do you save an SS officer from a regular army tribunal? Invent a report about the British using banned ammunition. General Erich Heppner commanded the 16th Army Corps. The rumors reached his desk. The general demanded a formal investigation. He wanted Totenkopf Division Commander Theodor Eicke dismissed for defiling military honor. The threat was real. Regular military courts still held power in 1940. Heavy official papers with SS stamps rustled on command tables. Eicke drafted an urgent dispatch straight to Heinrich Himmler at the Berlin headquarters. The document contained a calculated lie. He claimed the British troops had fired expanding dum-dum bullets. The 1899 Hague Declaration officially prohibited this ammunition. The international treaty gave the SS the perfect formal pretext to accuse the enemy of war crimes. The execution transformed on paper. It became a legitimate act of self-defense. Himmler received the falsified report. The SS leader used his leverage to block the military command. He choked the Wehrmacht inquiry before military prosecutors could gather any substantial evidence. The cover-up succeeded without a single trial session. The regular army closed the investigation. Himmler's sealed file cleared the way east. In 1940, Fritz Knöchlein commanded machine gunners at a French barn. A few years later, he accepted the highest national honors on the Eastern Front. He deployed to fight the Soviet Red Army. The High Command rewarded his combat methods with steady promotions. The Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross hung on his dress uniform. This specific medal required exceptional combat merit, officially transforming a war criminal into a recognized national hero. Out of millions of soldiers, only about 7,000 men ever received this award. Knöchlein quickly reached the senior rank of SS Obersturmbannführer. Adolf Hitler personally authorized these highest state decorations. The state leadership encouraged such behavior through career advancement. 2 surviving witnesses waited.
While the SS commander paraded his new medals, the survivors faced a different battle back home. The British government shielded a German officer from prosecution by simply refusing to believe their own wounded soldier. London officials expected a conventional conflict fought by a regular army. This expectation contrasted sharply with the reality of SS extermination. In the summer of 1943, Private Albert Pulley returned to Britain. His leg was rotting from severe gangrene, securing his medical repatriation. He immediately presented his account of the massacre to military authorities. Bureaucrats listened from behind polished desks inside the sterile offices of Whitehall. They dismissed his detailed descriptions as the post-traumatic paranoia of an injured man.
During 1943, British society still clung to the illusion of a civilized war, governed by the Hague Conventions. Mass executions seemed inconceivable to isolated civil servants. This skepticism granted the perpetrator 2 additional years of freedom. The stalemate broke in 1945. Private William O'Callaghan walked out of a liberated prisoner camp and returned to London with corroborating evidence.
O'Callaghan's testimony initiated the manhunt, but by May 1945, the target was already hiding among thousands of nameless captives. The former SS officer had shed his uniform. He dissolved into a mass of ordinary prisoners in Sheffield, using forged papers to mask his identity. His disguise failed against the military intelligence dragnet. Investigators located Fritz Knöchlein inside the transit camp. Guards escorted him to the London cage. This secret interrogation center operated in the respectable residential district of Kensington. Behind the elegant facades of Victorian mansions, intelligence officers dismantled the cover stories of captured Nazis. Bureaucrats ground down his fake identity. They forced the fugitive to confirm his real name. 3 years of continuous interrogations and evidence gathering went into a single indictment. The historic trial officially opened on October 11, 1948.
The gathered evidence finally reached the judges in Hamburg. Fritz Knöchlein stood in the dock. The former SS officer denied everything. He complained about his time in the London cage. He claimed British interrogators used freezing water. He described carrying heavy wooden logs until he fainted. The proceedings took place inside the Curio House. This building housed the British military tribunals. Here they judged camp administrators and SS officers directly in front of the local German population. Knöchlein built a wall of bureaucratic lies, distancing himself from the massacre. Then the physical witnesses arrived. Albert Pulley entered the courtroom. The sharp tap of his cane echoed through the quiet hall. William O'Callaghan stood beside him, directly confronting the accused. French farmers crossed post-war borders just to testify. They traveled hundreds of kilometers to point a finger at the commander in a foreign court. The defense strategy shattered. The tribunal sentenced Knöchlein to death by hanging. 37 years. This was the exact age of the SS Obersturmbannführer when he finally stood before the hangman. The tribunal's verdict materialized into a strict physical procedure on January 21, 1949, inside the secure execution facility of Hamburg Prison. Fritz Knöchlein stepped onto the wooden platform of the gallows. Ted Rohr, the designated British executioner, managed the precise mechanics of the drop. British execution protocols of the period required only seconds to complete. The system was deliberately designed to deny the condemned any opportunity for a final public speech or a lingering political gesture. Knöchlein stood directly over the trapdoor, glaring forward while gathering breath to scream a final curse against England. Rohr did not allow the performance to unfold. He forcefully pulled the heavy metal lever. A dry, metallic clang of the releasing trapdoor echoed sharply across the confined stone chamber. The condemned man's body plummeted downward into the empty space beneath the platform, instantly cutting off his unuttered words. The rope pulled taut. In 1949, a Hamburg rope put a hard stop to Fritz Knöchlein's biography. The execution closed the active legal case. It did not erase the material evidence of the war crime. History recorded his end coldly. Not a single tear was wept for the SS officer. The post-war pursuit concluded not with grand philosophical epilogues, but with strict bureaucratic filing. A thick manila folder holding the tribunal documents permanently sealed the military career of the commander. It contained the exact testimony of the few survivors. Their words ensured the perpetrator faced the gallows. Today, the original case files of the Paradis massacre rest inside the storage boxes of the National Archives in Kew. Yellowed interrogation transcripts and black and white photographs of the French farmhouse remain preserved on those metal shelves. They are the concrete physical proof of the execution of 97 men.